Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark from the United States.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Mark from the States. How we doing today? I'm doing fantastic. As you know, another plane went down in Philadelphia. This one is a medevac plane, I guess. It was transporting a patient to, I guess it's sad because it was a little girl who just had life-saving treatment. And it was 6 people, 2 pilots, 2 doctors, her and her mother. And the thing went down, literally fell out of the sky right after takeoff, like within 30 seconds. It was on one of those Lear jets that's converted. And the video shows, I don't know if you've seen the video, but it just shows this thing. It goes right into a Philadelphia neighborhood, and just like a missile out of the sky at like such a sharp angle right into the ground. And the explosion, it just took off. So it had a full tank of jet fuel, and it's horrible. What is going on? Oh my gosh. So yeah, this it's tough. It's been a rough few days. So prayers and thoughts with all those people. I believe all of them are from Mexico, except the pilots. Maybe they weren't. I'm not sure. But that's where they're eventually on their way back to, I guess. Awful. But I don't know how to transition, but we have a new channel today. I'm excited. I'm excited for this. Robslondon is the channel name. So contacted Rob. He is gracious enough to allow us to learn and watch his videos, and just cruising around through all the videos he has. There's so many I want to show all of you. Oh my gosh. But the best thing here is I can do this one today. We're going to learn the history of 10 Downing Street. I don't think I've ever done a video on just the history specifically on 10 Downing Street. So I'm excited. I am really excited to see this. But I encourage you, there's 2 links below me here. We know what to do. There's a link to the channel, so you can just get lost on there and watch as many as you can. And then there's a link to this video. So if you don't want to hear me pausing and talking, I encourage you to go watch that first. Then you can come back and add any context that I'm missing. You all know I learn a lot from the video itself, but I also learn a ton from your comments and emails after. So that's what makes our channel really cool. We're here to learn. We're here to learn, not get rich. We're here to learn. But Rob does it full time, so it's important that you go. If you have 1 like and 1 subscription to give today, I encourage you to go give it to Rob. Pardon the heater. I'm going to be battling the heater, going mute, sound on, sound off with the heater all video, I'm sure. But yeah, go give it to Rob. Don't put it on ours. It's important. I would love if you did it with our channel as well, but that's not important. Go give it to Rob and his channel, Robslondon. So very excited for this new channel. I hope everybody's doing well. I got a couch here. It's fake. It's going to, hopefully you can still hear me. It's going to sit all of you. No problem. Everybody's going to be comfortable. I got 2 cats. I don't know if you can see Leo. He's here. And we have Violet over here in her chair. They haven't gone anywhere. They're just been camera shy for a while now. But we're excited to watch this. So hopefully you are as well. All right, let's do it.
Hello, and thanks for stopping by. As the official office and residence of the British Prime Minister, Number 10 Downing Street is easily one of the UK's most famous, or depending on how you look at it, infamous addresses. The short street, which is just over 200 metres long, is heavily fortified nowadays, making it pretty much impossible for most of us ordinary folk to appreciate it. Usually the only time you get a decent view is via a TV news camera. Nevertheless, despite it being out of bounds, I'm going to do my best in this video to bring you a potted history of Downing Street, some aspects of which are rather shady, which, given the conduct of, shall we say, certain residents in recent years, is pretty fitting.
I have a feeling there's going to be a Boris Johnson story. Oh, this is going to be good. Of course, beer and cockfighting. Absolutely.
Over the past few centuries, Britain has had plenty of prime ministers who, it could be said, were so useless at their job, you wouldn't even trust them to run a pee-up in a brewery. It's perhaps rather apt then that the first building known to have stood on this site was indeed dedicated to making beer.
Huh.
Known as the Axe, this brewery was owned by the Abbey of Abingdon, a monastery once based in present-day Oxfordshire. You'll find Abingdon referenced in a street that runs close to the Houses of Parliament.
Abingdon.
By the 1500s, the Axe Brewery had fallen into disuse, and before long it was swallowed up by the mighty Whitehall Palace, which was undergoing a major expansion at the behest of King Henry VIII. As well as using Whitehall as a residence, Henry also transformed the complex into his own personal playground, and the approximate area where Downing Street is now sited was once home to tennis courts and a cockpit for staging vicious blood sports.
Cockpit steps, wow.
In 1581, a large house was built on the spot too. This was leased by Queen Elizabeth I to Sir Thomas Knivett, who happened to be one of her favourites, and who, it would seem, sported some of the puffiest breeches in the land. Knivett would later become famous as the fellow who found and arrested Guy Fawkes just hours before he was due to blow Parliament sky high.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Downing Street itself is named after Sir George Downing, and it's worth taking a moment here to look at who he was, because, as you'll soon see, he was one thoroughly vile individual. And let's be honest, you can't beat a good villain in a story, can you? Records related to Downing's birth are hazy, although it's believed he was born in either Dublin or London in the mid-1620s. He certainly lived in London as a child though. The family home was located on Fleet Street, close to the junction with Show Lane. When he was 13, the Downings emigrated to Salem, Massachusetts, and George went on to enroll at what was then the brand spanking new Harvard University.
Wow.
By the way, as these plaques in Southwark show, there's another important connection with Harvard to be found in London, but that's a story for another video.
I'm going to just pause here so I can read it. First benefactor of Harvard University, John Harvard. Huh. Born in Southwark, baptized in the cathedral, and educated in the parish's grammar school, sailed to Massachusetts in 1637. Voted by the people. Huh. I did not know this.
George Downing graduated from Harvard in 1642, being amongst the first group of 9 students to do so, and
Wow.
after which he was hired by the college as a tutor. He didn't stick that job for very long though, and after securing passage on a slave ship, Downing headed back to England. By this point, the English Civil War had erupted, and Downing, being an ardent parliamentarian who openly advocated for the execution of King Charles I, sided with Oliver Cromwell.
Not good.
Once the parliamentarians emerged victorious, and King Charles I was indeed beheaded outside the banqueting house, which is just across from where Downing Street now lies, Downing was sent to work as an ambassador at The Hague, where his bullish nature is believed to have sparked a deterioration in Anglo-Dutch relations. He was still in this role in 1658 when Oliver Cromwell died, an event which placed Downing in something of a pickle. You see, having spent a number of years under Cromwell's tyrannical rule, the people of what was then known as the Commonwealth of England had had enough. They wanted to restore the monarchy, and so Charles II, who had been in exile in Europe, was welcomed back to London with open arms. Consequently, George Downing, who, despite having fought against the monarchy and who'd taken great delight in seeing Charles's father have his head chopped off, decided to switch allegiance. And this was a process which necessitated a grotesque amount of grovelling.
I was going to say, how convenient. A lot of groveling, he says. Interesting. I'm sure he's not alone there, though. Let's be honest. I'm sure George Downing was not the only one who groveled his way back into the favor of the monarchy. I mean, it's all about survival.
After informing Charles II that he was now firmly on his side, Downing proved his so-called loyalty by providing information which not only incriminated several of his former comrades, but also condemned them to death.
Oh my God.
Amongst this betrayed group was John Oakey, the man who'd sponsored Downing's education in America.
Oh.
Pretty ungrateful, eh?
Betrayal.
Furthermore, Downing told the king that his old allegiance to Oliver Cromwell had been a result of him being led astray at Harvard University, that he'd, quote, sucked in certain principles whilst a student there, and that he now saw the error of his ways.
So Harvard, he's blaming Harvard. Yeah, look at what's happened today. Some crazy ideologies coming out of there. And I'm not talking about what we see in the streets and other people as well. There's some weirdos that come out of Harvard for sure. Harvard.
Needless to say, when people back in Massachusetts heard about this, they were rightfully disgusted.
Yeah.
And for many years after in New England, George Downing's name was employed as an insult, levelled at anyone deemed untrustworthy. Downing's treachery didn't go unnoticed in England either. Samuel Pepys, for example, who lived on a now lost Axe Yard, which was named after the old brewery and located just south of where Downing Street is now situated, deems the turncoat a perfidious rogue, adding that all the world took notice of him for a most ungrateful villain. Downing's
I'll tell you, Samuel Pepys. I'm going to go back to Samuel Pepys. He's like in all these videos. All of them. I apologize for the heater that's about to come on. I'll try to mute as much as possible. But yeah, Samuel Pepys. And the dude just speaks his mind too. I love it.
For a most ungrateful villain. Downing's toadying seemed to go down a treat with Charles II, though. He awarded the rogue a knighthood in 1660. Then, a few years later, in 1664, Downing ingratiated himself further by using his diplomatic skills to help secure the transfer of New Amsterdam from Dutch to English control, after which, of course, the settlement was renamed New York. It's for this reason that New York City has two Downing Streets named after the dreadful George. One in Greenwich Village, the other in Brooklyn.
Well, this is awesome. All right, so just so I'm on track here, he somehow went against the king with Cromwell, watched the king, the first, get his head chopped off. The second came back into power. He groveled and said he was actually on his side and that he was forced into following Cromwell, mainly because of the brainwashing that was going on in America at Harvard. And the king somehow bought it, or he was using him for another means, not sure. Granted him knighthood? Is that what he said? And he then in turn helps get New Amsterdam into New York, and New York now has streets named after him. Crazy.
Politics aside, George Downing had also been keen to enter the property market, and as such he had his eye on a prestigious plot of land beside the Palace of Whitehall. This was still occupied, however, by the grand property, now known as Hampton House, in which the descendants of Thomas Knivett were still living, meaning Downing had to play the waiting game. He finally got hold of the lease on Hampton House in 1682, and promptly had it torn down, along with a number of other neighbouring buildings. Downing's plan was to build a cul-de-sac consisting of between 15 and 20 houses, and for this project he hired Sir Christopher Wren, who already had his hands full with reconstructing St Paul's Cathedral and many other of the city's churches which had been lost to the Great Fire of London. However, as well as having his well-documented traitorous tendencies, George Downing was also extremely tight-fisted, and as such, despite securing the services of the finest architect in the land, he insisted that the houses should be built as cheaply as possible. And cheaply built they were, with corners cut everywhere. The brickwork, for example, was very shoddy, the mortar lines merely being drawn on to give the illusion of them being neatly laid, whilst the foundations were nowhere near deep enough. A huge problem, considering the land upon which Downing Street sits is considerably boggy, it being so close to the River Thames. The problems created by Downing's penny pinching left a long-lasting impact. Centuries later, for example, one of Number 10's most celebrated residents, Sir Winston Churchill, complained that the building was, quote, shaky and lightly built by the profiteering contractor whose name they bear. George Downing never lived long enough to benefit from the profits of his cowboy building cheapskate enterprise. He died in July 1684, aged 59.
So not only is he a turncoat or a traitor, or treacherous traitor, he then is also a cheapskate. It's only fitting that he wasn't around to really benefit from a lot of those things. I guess that's not young back then, maybe, I don't know, but just the whole thing is so bizarre how he was even able to do it. But I mean, things were way different. I would have thought he would be, I mean, the sheer fact that he gave up all his compatriots, his partners, especially even the guy who sponsored him to go to school, that's low. That's cold.
Despite its properties being shoddily built, Downing Street was still a prestigious address, and a number of notable residents lived here in the late 1600s and early 1700s. Rather confusingly, the numbering on Downing Street was haphazard in those days, and completely different to what exists now. Number 10, for example, was originally number 5, and it remained so until 1779. There was a pub on Downing Street too. It was called the Rose and Crown, and remained in place until the early 19th century. Whilst another tavern, the splendidly named Cat and Bagpipes, stood on the corner of Downing Street during the same era.
Love it.
The closest pub today is the Red Lion.
You know, Rob's done a video on pubs too that I'm going to. You know how I love pubs and the history that they have. So definitely going to dig into those.
The last known private resident to live at what would become 10 Downing Street was a fellow named, and this is absolutely true, Mr. Chicken. Although apart from his unusual name, and the fact that he vacated in the 1730s, little else is known about this mysterious figure.
Mr. Chicken.
Although it's a role which has gradually evolved over time, the first Prime Minister, in the sense that we now know it, is generally regarded to be Robert Walpole, so it's rather fitting that he was also the first official to live in Downing Street.
And if you saw yesterday's video, or the last video it did, it featured Prime Minister Walpole pretty prominently. And if I remember, the longest running even to this day.
After Mr. Chicken had presumably moved out, King George II offered what was then still number 5 Downing Street as a personal gift to Walpole. It would seem Walpole had more integrity than the man who'd built Downing Street though, as he refused to accept the house for himself. Instead, he suggested it should be used as the official residence for the First Lord of the Treasury, which he happened to be at the time, and which is the position we today equate with Prime Minister.
Okay.
This was agreed to, and it's for this reason that the title First Lord of the Treasury remains engraved upon number 10's letterbox to this day.
Well, that's awesome. I love history.
Now the house had been granted an official role, a neighbouring property which stood behind was thrown into the bargain too. This second home faced Horse Guards Parade, But when it was combined with the Downing Street house, it was essentially shifted on its axis so that its front was orientated towards Downing Street. This reconfiguration then enabled a terrace and 10 Downing Street's famous garden to be built towards the back.
I totally get that.
The work was overseen by the architect William Kent, who created a number of grand rooms for entertaining guests, along with an impressive grand staircase, along which portraits of every Prime Minister who's occupied Downing Street are now displayed. Robert Walpole finally moved into Downing Street on the 22nd of September 1735. Prior to that, he'd resided on St James's Square.
And of course, in 1740, a few years later, guy produces his ear. Oh, and all heck breaks loose. Interesting. Wow, I love it. Hellfire Club.
After living and working there for 7 years, Robert Walpole left Downing Street in 1742, and although it remained in the hands of the government, this official residence remained empty for the next 20 years, with Walpole's successors preferring to reside in their own homes.
Oh.
The next official to live in by what had now been renumbered Number 10 was Sir Francis Dashwood, who occupied the residence between 1762 and 1763, during his brief tenure as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Born on Great Marlborough Street in 1708, Dashwood was, rather like certain modern politicians who shall remain nameless, a spoilt fellow with a huge sense of entitlement and apparently devoid of any sense of responsibility. In fact, it said that when he was appointed Chancellor of the Exchequer, the announcement was met with howls of laughter from the House of Commons, whose members viewed Dashwood as being both debauched and immature, despite the fact that he was well into his 50s. To be honest, their derision was justified. Dashwood had spent most of his life partying, having founded a number of societies over the years to do so, such as the Society of the Lante Dining Club in 1732, the Divan Club in 1744, and most notoriously, in 1755, his own version of the Hellfire Club, aka the Monks of Meadenham Abbey. This organisation involved Dashwood, who was by far the most depraved member, acting as a kind of high priest, who, according to one observer, used a communion cup to pour out libations to heathen deities, whilst his pals, all dressed up as monks, sang obscene parodies of Franciscan rites.
Oh boy.
Dashwood used Number 10 Downing Street to host Hellfire get-togethers, and was later rewarded for his lacklustre time in office by being granted a peerage. Nothing changes really, does it?
Wasn't there long, but he certainly made a mark.
After Dashwood's booze-fueled time at Number 10, the next person to occupy the building, and technically the second Prime Minister to live there, was George Granville, who moved in 1763. He was followed by Lord North, who added a selection of iconic features which still define the building today, namely the checkered floor in the main entrance hall, the large lamp above the door, and the lion's head door knocker.
I love that they're still there.
Originally, the famous door, which can only be opened from the inside, was fashioned from sturdy black oak, although for security purposes, the current version is made from reinforced steel. There are in fact 2 doors, which are rotated for maintenance every 2 years, and apparently they're so heavy, 8 people are required to lift them.
Oh my gosh.
The original oak door, meanwhile, is now displayed in a nearby Churchill War Rooms Museum.
The Churchill War
Although the door is called over for being black, there was a brief period in the early 20th century when it was painted dark green, a colour that was suggested by Herbert Asquith's wife, Margot. Number 10's brickwork used to be a different colour too. Originally, it was yellow, but decades of London's smoggy pollution stained it into a blackish grey. This original shade was uncovered during extensive renovation work carried out in the 1960s, although as people had grown used to seeing the polluted version of Number 10, it was decided to paint the facade in that same greyish hue.
Wow.
By the 1820s, 10 Downing Street had firmly embedded itself at the heart of government, and as such had received further improvements, including a grand dining room by Sir John Soane, the architect who designed the Bank of England. Despite this though, Number 10 was facing serious problems. The building was very dilapidated, a hangover no doubt from George Downing's miserly ways. And in the 1860s, it was massively overshadowed when the huge Foreign Office building was built next door. The property
envious.
had new life breathed into it, however, by Benjamin Disraeli and William Gladstone, both prime ministers who had considerable sums of money spent on sprucing number 10 up, including the introduction of telephones and electrical lighting.
Got to modernize it, sure. Here's the thing, yeah, the Foreign Office next door looks amazing, and you figure if this is where the head of the government is, it should look, just as wonderful as these other buildings. But on the other hand, it's like, well, you're working for the people, so the people's house should kind of be similar to what the White House has that kind of a thing. Well, it's like you work for us technically, and but this house is so. I don't know. There's that fine line. It's got to be so wonderful, but yet it's also got to be somewhat, in line with the people. But yeah, this has been just an awesome video. Damn heater. Hate it.
Until relatively recently in its history, it was possible for the public to walk along Downing Street, with the only visible security being a policeman stationed outside the door. In the early 19th century, those on guard duty were provided with special chairs, designed by Thomas Chippendale, which included hooded tops to provide protection against the elements, along with a drawer beneath the seats into which hot coals could be popped for heat. One of these chairs survives today, and is now displayed within number 10's main entrance hall. Downing Street experienced its first real security threat in June 1780, when London was rocked by the Gordon riots, during which a mob attempted to storm number 10. Fortunately for Lord North, who was Prime Minister at the time, soldiers managed to hold the crowd back. Access to the street was first restricted in 1920, when an 8-foot-tall wooden barricade was installed as a measure against potential violence from those campaigning for the Irish Free State. When the Free States came into being in 1922, this barrier was dismantled and the public were once again allowed to wander back in. One particularly large gathering occurred outside number 10 in September 1938, when a crowd came to greet Neville Chamberlain, who'd just returned from Munich with a deal supposedly guaranteeing peace with Germany. This, of course, was a grave misjudgment, and less than a year later, Chamberlain, broadcasting directly from Downing Street, made one of the most sombre radio announcements in British history.
This is London. You will now hear a statement by the Prime Minister.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
Wow. I don't think I've heard that before. Wow. That was... I know I just keep saying wow, but wow.
Following the outbreak of war, the Nazis compiled a long list of people, the so-called Black Book, who, in the advent of an invasion of Britain, were to be arrested. Naturally, as seen in this reproduction of that booklet, which can be viewed at the Imperial War Museum, the wanted list included the Prime Minister at Downing Street. In World War II, number 10's windows were kitted out with steel shutters, and a reinforced shelter was built beneath the property. But this did not stop the famous address from suffering some bomb damage, and for a time, wooden struts had to be put in place to ensure the building was secure. Vehicle access to Downing Street was restricted in 1973 with the installation of a simple barrier, although people could still walk through and have their photo taken in front of the door. But pedestrian access was essentially cut off in 1982 when a longer line of low railings was stretched across the junction with Whitehall. The hefty gates which now stand guard, and which make viewing number 10 almost impossible, were installed in 1989, but they didn't stop the IRA from attempting an audacious mortar attack on Downing Street in February 1991, the intention of which was to kill John Major and his entire cabinet. This attack was launched from a hole cut into the top of a Ford Transit van, which was parked on the junction of Horse Guards Avenue and Whitehall. Fortunately, apart from a few minor injuries, no one was hurt in the attack, despite the shells causing considerable damage.
There's that kitty. Yeah, insane history. Yeah, I'm just still going back to Neville Chamberlain's broadcast. That was wild. But I could totally see why they block it off. I mean, I can't imagine why anybody would think it's a good idea to have that just accessed by anybody these days. It's a shame. I wish they would do like tours, you know. That would be cool. Maybe they do. I don't know. You'll have to let me know. But I totally get why there's fences now. I just wish there was a better angle you can get to take a photo.
Despite being represented by a solitary door, number 10 has evolved into a very large complex, which
pretty
now
famous.
incorporates its neighbours, 11 and 12, and amongst which are some 100 rooms. Although number 10 is generally regarded to be the Prime Minister's official home,
Margaret?
the living quarters being in an apartment on the upper floor, number 11 has fulfilled this role in recent years, the first PM to switch being Tony Blair in 1997, as he had a young family, and the area within number 11 of the larger living space. One constant at Downing Street has been the Chief Mouser. In other words, number 10's resident cat, who, as the title suggests, is there to keep a lid on rodents. This is a role which dates back centuries, although records on each puss have only been kept since the 1920s. Past cats since then have included Treasury Bill, who served under Ramsay MacDonald, the Munich Mouser, who worked in the late 1930s and early 1940s, and Wilberforce, who was on duty between 1973 and 1986. At the time of making this video, the current incumbent is Larry, who was selected from Battersea Dogs and Cats Home. As we've seen in this video, unless you're lucky enough to have a special appointment, it's now sadly impossible for the general public to have their picture snapped outside number 10. There is a cheat though. If you head over to Adam Street, which isn't too far away off the Strand, you'll find this door, which is an almost identical copy. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at the history behind 10 Downing Street. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this famous address. Did you ever manage to wander along Downing Street before the large gates blocked off access? And who do you think its most worthy, or for that matter, unworthy resident has been? Please be sure to let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and haven't done so already, then I'd really appreciate it if you could please consider subscribing to my channel, as this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive notifications, will ensure you don't miss out whenever I publish a new Robslondon episode. And it goes without saying, of course, that it'd be great to have you along. Thank you so much to all of you who left kind words on my recent Baker Street video. Your kindness and support really does mean a lot to me. If you're feeling extra generous, you can also support me via my Ko-fi page, or alternatively by using the YouTube thanks button, which appears below the video as a heart icon. Any donations are of course greatly appreciated and play a big part in helping me make videos. If you're interested in merchandise, I have an Etsy store too, Rob's Online Designs, where you'll find an array of hand-illustrated mugs, featuring designs of tube trains, taxis, buses and so on. I'll leave a link to that, along with my Ko-fi page, in the description. For now though, thanks again friends, Stay well, and please be sure to stay tuned.
Well, that was awesome. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. Please get over to Robslondon and support him, and go get lost on his channel and search for all the cool videos. I plan on doing more. He's been just wonderful. So thank you, Rob. Appreciate you. And thank you to all of you. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. I don't know if actually I'm going to do a video tomorrow. I think I have to go down to the airport. So take my sister down there. But I probably won't be doing a video tomorrow. But Monday, for sure. Have a great day, everybody. Hope everybody's happy, healthy, and safe. And we'll see you later. All right, bye.
Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark. And he's from